Now, President Cyril Ramaphosa will today attend the inauguration of President-elect of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Bola Ahmed Tinubu. Tinubu will be officially sworn in as Nigeria's 16th president after he won what has been described as the tightest Nigerian presidential election in decades. Now, this amidst the opposition candidates challenging Tinubu's victory on the 25th of February polls in court, saying that the election results were manipulated and the elections marred by violence, voter intimidation and vote buying. In his farewell speech, Tinubu's predecessor, Muhammadu Buhari, said that he is confident that he's leaving office with Nigeria better in 2023 than in 2015. Now, to talk more about this, we are joined by Professor Christopher Isike, who is the Professor of African Politics and International Relations at the University of Pretoria, and is also a Director of African Center of Studies of the United States University of in Pretoria. It's good to have you. Thanks very much for joining us, Professor.
Good morning, Leanne, and thank you for having me.
So obviously, you know, these elections have been exceptionally interesting. And I mean, when we look at the number of votes that Tinubu actually got to win, I mean, he only received 37% of the vote when we go back and have a look at the February 25th presidential election polls that were held in Nigeria. You know, other candidates that were in there, I mean, this is less than 50%. So, I mean, when we look at this, this is a very difficult one, I imagine, for the population to actually be accepting.
Yes, absolutely. Contrived as they are, going by the election results, which you just talked about, Mr. Bola Tinubu would be the least popularly elected president in Nigeria's political history. Like you said, having won only 37% of the vote to be so declared. So he's not quite a popular president, but for the peaceful kind of the Labour Party presidential candidate, Mr. Peter Obi, who decided to use judicial means to reclaim a mandate which he believes was stolen from him. We don't know where Nigeria would have been today.
Yeah, I mean, when we look at his popularity, and this is something obviously that you need a candidate and a president that people are going to listen to. But you know, the popularity leaves a lot to be questioned. Firstly, the voter turnout wasn't very high, and when the youth's involvement were in this, I mean, we saw his opposition candidates. Abu Bakr won 29% of the vote, and Obi got 25%. So with Tinubu sitting at 37%. You know, this is a very difficult position that he is in, especially taking over the position that Nigeria is in many instances. But we'll talk to the current climate in Nigeria. But in terms of the youth and the popularity vote, does Tinubu have this? Do you think he can win this over?
I doubt that very much. Talking about the figures, I would tell you right straight away that the previous numbers we've gotten were obviously inflated. This election attracted more interest from Nigerians, especially young people, than has been the case since 1999. But besides voter suppression here and there, I started by saying that these figures, as we have them, are actually contrived, because Mr. Tinubu was not expected to win the presidential election, and is now generally viewed by more Nigerians than those who voted for him as a selected president by the electoral management body, and of course Nigeria's ruling elite, than as a president elected, by the Nigerian people. Like you indicated, there is currently a litigation, of the elections by the two main opposition parties, the Labour Party, who you said won 25%, and the PDP, which was largely frustrated by the INEC through delayed tactics and the refusal to produce the original results sheets, that were used to declare Mr. Tinubu as president-elect. Obviously, the hope was to frustrate the case before the inauguration today, to prevent any kind of judicial intervention in the electoral process, and hope that it fizzles out with time, as Nigeria has no history of anyone, successfully litigating a presidential election, which becomes especially more difficult now, even after the inauguration. However, this is an unusual case given the blatant discrepancies in the results declared by INEC and what you'll find on their own result portal. So unless the judiciary, joins INEC to compromise and subvert the will of the people, Mr. Tinubu may actually end up being removed as president.
Very, very difficult. I mean, when you look at that, and also the fact that the turnout in the Nigerian elections was, and please correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, it was about 26% of the population actually turned out to vote during the polls.
Well, yes, that's correct. But you know, that's the figures. These figures are not actually correct. You know, there are more people turning out to vote in these elections than previous elections. The problem is that previous elections have always been padded with numbers. In this case, results were contrived and changed. So what was finally declared is far, far less than you know, what was the actual number of people, you know, voter turnout and registered voters. And like I said earlier on, there are a lot of discrepancies between, you know, results that were eventually uploaded on the INEC portal and the ones that were actually announced. And those were also different from the ones that some of the political parties that are contesting the results actually have in their possession. So it's a lot of controversy around all of these, and we hope that the courts will be able to rise up to the occasion to sort these messy issues out.
Do you think he can, though? I mean, we do know that what we know about Tinubu is he is one of Nigeria's richest politicians. That we do know. And based on his campaign, you know, he has, I suppose, a record of rebuilding the biggest city, Lagos, in Nigeria. But, you know, is this good enough? And let's throw into this the fact that his age, he is 71 years old. You know, Nigeria's population is quite a young population as well, along with the rest of Africa. Can they relate to him? Is he the guy for the job to turn Nigeria around?
Well, I don't think so, personally, and that's my view. Mr. Tinubu is, like you said, a powerful political figure in Nigeria and in the ruling party, the APC. He did fairly well, you know, as governor of Lagos, even though many of the projects he initiated during his term were elitist, and he particularly failed to build a hospital good enough to treat him. As up till last month, he still went abroad, you know, for medical care, just as Buhari has done in the last 8 years. And also, to be fair to him too, Mr. Tinubu has the political and social capital to attract and bring quality minds together to achieve something meaningful. But if this was in 2007, when he was still in his prime, having just finished his term as governor of Lagos, I would be more, you know, optimistic. So the fact of the matter is that this was over 20 years ago. Mr. Tinubu is now past his best intellectually and mentally and physically, and will not have the required personal clout to govern a country like Nigeria, which has no structured institution and machinery of governance, as you find in more established democracies, where the personal touch of the president is not always, you know, needed to get things moving. So I predict that it will be pretty much more like, you know, Buhari's tenure of more time in hospitals abroad and actually running the country.
Yeah. In his farewell speech, Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari, the former president, said that he's leaving behind an electoral process which guarantees that votes count. And after what I'm hearing from you, it's hard to understand this. I mean, he said results are credible, elections have been fair and transparent, and the influence of money in politics reduced him to, or reduced to the barest of minimum, is what he had to say. But this is opposition candidates, as we know, are challenging this court victory, saying that the elections were manipulated and that the elections were marred by violence, voter intimidation, vote buying. This is going to court tomorrow, if I'm not mistaken. And I mean, we could see results coming in the next month. So let's talk about the independence of the courts in Nigeria and hearing something like this. Do they stand a chance?
Well, the courts in Nigeria have been involved in you know, what we call judicialization of politics and elections in Nigeria since 1999. They've played key roles in determining you know, the political outcomes of politicians and those who become you know, governors, and as the case may be. It's not a straightforward answer, you know, talking about the autonomy of the judiciary in this regard. There are instances where the judiciary have lived up to expectation and done the right things. There are also many other instances right under President Buhari where the judiciary have been compromised. The president was a dictator, in my view, in the 8 years that he was in office. He was in full control of the legislative and judicial arm of government. He intervened and never respected even judicial outcomes himself. So, like I said, it's a mixed bag of achievements, if you like. You talked about the electoral reforms that were conducted by the President Buhari, and to be fair to him, he did have some achievements, in terms of reforms, and this the electoral one would have been pivotal if there were no loopholes that allowed the electoral management body INEC to actually not use the BVAS machine, which was to enable the transmission of results as they were coming. That was the game changer, in terms of rigging.
Prof,
yes.
I have to leave it there, but thank you. Thanks for giving us a bit of an understanding as to what was going down. But this is the big story today, the inauguration of the new Nigerian president, Professor Christopher Isike, Professor of African Politics and International Relations at the University of Pretoria, giving us a little bit of a preview as to the results and what went down in these elections.